The rain came down soft at first, the kind that feels almost gentle on your skin, like a warning you don't hear until it's too late. By the time the taxi pulled onto Cascade Road, the drizzle had turned into a steady stream. The curb outside my son's house glistened, puddles pooling around the cracks in the concrete. That's where he set my suitcase, one in each hand, like he was unloading groceries instead of 61 years of my life. "Ma," Daryl muttered, not quite looking me in the eyes. "It's for the best." I stared at him, my heart hammering slow and heavy, the way it does when the doctor takes too long to deliver your test results. His face, the same face I used to kiss goodnight after storybooks and prayer, was now flat, unreadable. Behind him stood Candace, arms folded across her chest, lips pressed so tight they were nearly white. Her umbrella tilted just enough to cover her own head, but not wide enough to shield me. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The suitcases thudded against the curb. One corner bent. A box, followed a cardboard box, stuffed with picture frames, old letters, and the ceramic angel I D kept on my dresser since 1974. Daryl adjusted his shirt collar like a man tidying up after a job well done. That was the moment, the exact breath where I realized my husband's death had left me not only widowed, but discarded. For 37 years, Charles and I had built a life brick by brick. We paid off mortgages, raised our boy, kept food on the table, sang in the church choir. Now here I was, left in the rain like old furniture, put out for bulk pickup. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice so small I barely recognized it. Candace shrugged, the movement sharp, dismissive, like flicking lint off a sleeve. "That's not our problem anymore," she said. Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was casual, indifferent, as though she were telling me the weather forecast. My knees trembled, but pride held me upright. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask what kind of children. Forget the woman who labored for them, who scrubbed floors until her knuckles cracked, who stayed up all night during fevers and double shifts. But I didn't scream. Instead, I clutched the handle of my sagging suitcase. A cab rolled to the curb. The driver leaned across the seat to push the door open. "You, Miss Johnson?" His voice carried an accent, maybe West African.com, but curious. "Yes," I whispered, though the word felt like sandpaper in my throat. I climbed into the back, the cab's vinyl seats sticking to my damp dress. I didn't look back, not because I was strong, but because I was broken. Through the foggy window, I caught a last glimpse of Candace, already stepping back inside, her lips forming silent words to Daryl. "Once we get this mortgage under control, she won't matter." That sentence didn't just slice, burned. The door shut. The cab pulled away, tire splashing water onto the curb. My house, my family, my place, it all shrank in the rearview mirror, until it was just another shadow in the rain. Inside, the silence roared louder than thunder. My heart pressed against my ribs like it wanted out. My eyes stayed dry though. I'd learned that tears don't change much, but grit can. I had $847 in my purse, no job, and nowhere to go. A lifetime of sacrifices had boiled down to motel rates and a handful of crumpled bills. I thought of Charles' funeral, of the folded flag, of the church choir humming "It Is Well with My Soul," and I thought, maybe it is well, or maybe it's not, but either way, I still have breath in my body. The Royal Inn on Campbellton Road became my new home. $43 a night bought me a room that smelled like pine sol and broken promises. The walls were thin enough to hear arguments from next door, laughter from strangers, television reruns, muffled by cheap drywall. But I survived. Mr. Earl, the desk clerk, noticed me struggling with my bags. He was a tall man with a gray beard, eyes the color of wet earth. "You ain't like the usual folks we get here," he said softly. His voice was half pity, half respect. I forced a smile. "Baby, life don't ask permission before it knocks you down." That night, I sat on the stiff motel bed, my cardboard box on the floor beside me. I opened it. One photo of Daryl as a boy, his gap-toothed grin lit up under a Little League cap. Another of Charles, arms crossed proudly after finishing a home repair. And that ceramic angel, cracked on the wing from the fall. I touched its smooth face and whispered, "This isn't the end. It's just a different chapter." But even as I said it, doubt swirled. Could a 61-year-old widow, with no home and barely any money, find a way back? As the motel's busted AC unit groaned like an old blues singer, I lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. My eyelids fluttered. Sleep came, but not gently. It came jagged, filled with memories of laughter that no longer belonged to me. And yet, somewhere beneath the ache, a flicker of something stirred. Not joy, not yet, not hope, not fully. Something quieter. A whisper. You've been here before, Loretta. You've carried heavier loads. You can carry this too. The motel walls seemed to press closer each morning, but Loretta had a history with survival. And when survival is second nature, opportunity always comes knocking, even if it first looks like trash behind a beauty shop. The Royal Inn was the kind of place folks only stayed in when they had nowhere else to go. The sign out front flickered half the letters, so at night it just read R.L. Inn. My new reality, a cracked parking lot with oil stains that told their own stories, and a row of doors painted in peeling blue, each one holding secrets no one wanted told. I checked into room 12, the door stuck before it opened, like it didn't trust me yet. Inside, the room smelled faintly of pine sol cigarette smoke, and something sour hidden in the carpet. The bedspread was stiff, patterned in faded maroon swirls. A TV sat crooked on its stand, already buzzing with static, before I even turned it on. Mr. Earl, the desk clerk with the gray beard, had slid me an extra towel earlier. Don't say I never did nothing for you, he joked, but his eyes softened when he saw me clutching my bags. He'd been working that desk for 20 years, and could spot the difference between somebody passing through and somebody starting over. Mr. Earl wasn't he just the man at the desk with the master keys and the drawer full of spare toothpaste? He had a past, though he carried it lightly, like a man used to walking with secrets. One night, maybe 2 weeks after I'd moved into that Pine Sol motel room, I came down to the lobby to heat up some leftover chicken in the microwave. Earl was wiping down the counter slow, listening to an old record player humming in the background. The voice was gravel and honey, a saxophone sliding easy. You like jazz, Miss Loretta? He asked without looking up. My husband used to play Coltrane on Sundays, I said. Made the whole house feel like it had soft curtains. Earl chuckled. I knew Coltrane. Not personally, but I knew his horn. I ran a club back in the 70s, over on Auburn Avenue, called it the Blue Note. Folks came from everywhere, preachers, hustlers, students, and housewives who just wanted to dance. We had brass, bass, and joy. His eyes twinkled like he was back there, smoke curling through the lights. One night, Gladys Knight herself stepped in, sang 2 songs for free, just because she felt good. I thought I'd live forever in that room. What happened? I asked gently. He set the rag down, sighing. Rent doubled. Partners argued. Dreams don't always pay bills, baby girl. Club closed. Marriage closed. Ended up here, working nights. Ain't no shame. But sometimes I still hear the horns when the AC rattles. I felt something tighten in my chest. Here was a man who had touched magic, now handing out room keys at midnight, and yet he didn't look bitter. He looked steady. Don't you ever feel like life cheated you? I asked. He leaned on the counter, his gray beard catching the lamplight. Life don't cheat, Miss Loretta. It just deals cards. Some folks fold too early, some folks play smart. Me, I keep playing, 'cause the next hand might be the one. I nodded slow. The microwave dinged, but I let it sit. Earl's words wrapped around me like a quilt. That night, back in my room with reheated chicken and stale cornbread, I thought about the curb, the cab ride, the Pine Sol walls. Maybe I hadn't been cheated either. Maybe I'd just been dealt a new hand. And like Earl, I wasn't ready to fold. The first night, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my 2 suitcases and the cardboard box. That box was my whole past. My husband's obituary clipped from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a photo of Daryl with a gap-toothed grin at age 6. Candace never made it into my box, not one frame. Funny how memory chooses what's worth carrying. The motel walls were thin. I could hear muffled arguments through one side, the rhythm of a headboard through the other. The Royal Inn wasn't home, but it was a choir of strangers surviving their own storms. Above me, footsteps paced until dawn. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried, then went silent after a lullaby hummed low. Every morning, I folded the thin motel blanket, straightened the stiff pillows, and whispered to myself, "You are still here." It wasn't a prayer exactly, more like a contract. A reminder that, as long as I woke up, I had a chance to rewrite my story. On the 4th morning, I took the city bus down Marietta Boulevard. Destination, the public library. Free internet, free air conditioning, free hope. That library became my office. The clicking of keyboards was the hum of ambition, and the smell of old books felt like home. I filled out job applications, cashier, receptionist, anything. One Thursday I interviewed at King's Crown Beat 61. Most employers looked at me like I was already retired, but I knew better. Retirement is a luxury, survival is a skill. Auto Supply, the place smelled like hairspray and cocoa butter. Shelves lined with wigs, relaxers, and edge controls, stacked like small soldiers. Mr. King, the owner, sat across from me, tapping his pen against my resume like he was keeping time in a song. "You got bookkeeping experience?" he asked. 20 years, I replied, steady. Kept the books for my husband's contracting business. He flipped the paper. Looks like you spotted my mistake in aisle 3 before I even hired you." I raised an eyebrow. "You're double-paying suppliers, losing thousands a month." He leaned back, studying me. 15 an hour, part-time. "When do I start?" I asked, not missing a beat. That first paycheck was $240. I held it in my hands like it was a golden ticket. It wasn't much, but it was proof that I still had value in a world trying to tell me otherwise. The motel room became more than a place to sleep. It became a lab, a sanctuary, a proving ground. I noticed pallets of expired products being thrown away behind the store conditioners, shampoos, oils, perfectly good but tossed like garbage. "What happens to those?" I asked Mr. King one day. "Trash," he shrugged. Policy don't mean wisdom." I asked to take some home. Back in room 12, I spread jars and bottles across the small desk, mixing ant vise, castor oil, peppermint drops, raw shea butter from Auburn Avenue. My hands stirred until the mixture whipped into something smooth, something shining like Sunday morning. I called it Crown and Glory Sunday Butter, because every day deserved a first Sunday shine. The next Sunday, I brought 10 jars to church. Deaconess Marie sniffed one, rubbed it into her edges, and hollered so loud half the pews turned. "Baby, my scalp feels like heaven." By the end of service, every jar was gone. Before the benediction ended, my purse was fat with 20s. That night in the motel, I set the money on the bedspread, counted it slow. $820. Almost enough for 3 weeks' rent at the Royal Inn. I laughed. Not the kind of laugh you hear at a comedy show, no. This was a laugh that came from deep in the belly, the kind you make when life tries to bury you, but forgets you're a seed. But the devil always strolls by when you start shining. That Sunday, as I packed up my empty jars, I caught a glimpse of Candace in the back of the church. She smirked, her eyes sharp like a blade. She leaned close to another woman and whispered, then looked back at me, mouthing, "This won't last." My chest tightened. For a moment, doubt tried to crawl in, but then I remembered the motel walls, thin enough to hear other people's survival, strong enough to remind me I wasn't the only one fighting, and that's when I knew this was just the beginning. The motel had been a shelter. The jars had been a spark. But opportunity is fragile. Loretta's Sunday butter was about to leave room 12 and walk into a storm Candace never saw coming. By the third Sunday, word had spread. Choir mothers clutched their purses like they were smuggling treasure, waiting for me to pull jars out of my tote bag. Deaconess Marie was my loudest advertiser. She leaned across pews whispering, "That butter brought my edges back from the dead." I didn't need a billboard. I had a congregation. Every jar I made in room 12 sold out before the final hymn. The motel desk clerk, Mr. Earl, chuckled one night as I carried a grocery bag full of empty containers upstairs. "Miss Loretta, you running a factory up there?" I grinned. Factory of survival. But survival was turning into something else, momentum. It was Sister Janice's granddaughter, a Spelman student named Kendra, who gave me my first taste of modern power. She took a picture of me holding a jar, my Sunday hat tilted, my smile wide, and posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Support Auntie's science." Thought that'd be enough. But baby, church by the second Sunday, I only brought 20 jars to church. Ladies got tongues quicker than Twitter. Before service even started, Sister Hattie was whispering in the vestibule, "You tried Loretta's butter yet? Smells like the Lord himself bottled Psalm 23. Deaconess Marie waved her hand. "Child," I rubbed it on my edges, and my husband couldn't stop calling me baby all night. After 32 years of marriage, the choir mothers leaned in, giggling behind lace fans. "Well, pass me one before communion. Edges and miracles." "Yes, ma'am." By offering time, I had a line in the hallway. Ushers were trying to keep folks quiet, but do you ever try to hush a woman who just discovered her scalp tingling like peppermint candy? Not possible. Sister Janine pulled me aside, whispering loud enough for half the sanctuary to hear. "Miss Loretta, my daughter's at Spelman, and she says the campus hair store can't keep good oils in stock. You better start shipping, 'cause these girls buy faster than they buy textbooks." They all laughed so loud, the pastor peeked from behind the pulpit. "Y'all gossiping about hair while we preparing the word," he teased. Sister Hattie hollered back, "Pastor, the word says glory is in a woman's crown, and we just trying to keep ours upright." The whole church roared. Even pastor had to wipe his eyes. By benediction, I was sold out. My purse, so fat with cash I had to hold it with both hands. But it wasn't the money that filled me, it was the laughter. The little jolts of joy flying across pews like sparrows. Candace sat 3 rows back, her face sour as vinegar. She whispered something in Daryl's ear, and he looked away from me like I was a stranger. Let her stew. The women of Greater New Hope Baptist had already anointed me their edge prophet that night. Back in my motel room, I sat cross-legged on the bed, counting bills under the glow of the lamp. For the first time since the curb, I laughed out loud. Not because of the money, but because joy had found its way back to me. One jar at a time. I didn't even know what Instagram was, but that picture traveled faster than gossip in a beauty salon. By Monday morning, my Gmail inbox was overflowing with order requests. Spelman, Morehouse, Clark at Lantol, the HBCU kids wanted jars. My phone buzzed so much, I thought it had caught the Holy Ghost. That night in room 12. I sat cross-legged on the bed, staring at the screen. Orders from strangers. I whispered to myself, strangers trusting me with their hair. My laugh bubbled up again. That belly-deep laugh, the kind that makes you feel alive. But just as the laughter filled the room, a shadow followed it. Candace. That Sunday, she approached me in the church parking lot. Her heels clicked on the asphalt like gunshots. She had on one of those silk blouses that looked expensive but felt cheap, and her perfume was strong enough to knock out mosquitoes. "So," she said, arms folded, lips pursed, "this little hustle of yours, cute." I tightened my grip on my tote bag. "It's more than cute, it's rent." Her eyes narrowed. "You really think selling homemade goo out of a motel room is a future? Please, you'll burn out by Christmas." I smiled slow. "Rent's paid when you mind your own business." For the first time, Candace flinched. She wasn't used to me snapping back, but her smirk returned quick, like a snake coiling. "Don't get too comfortable, Miss Loretta. You've always been temporary." She turned and walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks. That night in the motel, I couldn't sleep. Her words gnawed at me. Temporary. Like I was nothing more than a guest in my own life. I stared at the jars lined up on my dresser, gleaming faintly in the lamplight, and that's when I decided, temporary or not, I'd build something permanent. I went back to the library and asked Miss Alvarez at the Small Business Development Center for help. She wore red glasses and a sharp bob, the kind of woman who made you sit up straighter without saying a word. She flipped through my notebook where I tracked every jar, every dollar. "You're not peddling jars, Miss Johnson," she said, tapping her pen. "You're running a supply chain. We'll file for a Small Business Administration microloan. Them forms longer than Deuteronomy." I muttered. She grinned. "Good thing we know how to read." 3 months later, I signed papers for my first loan, $12,000, bought a food-grade mixer, jars with proper labels, and rented a tiny suite off Campbellton Road. The first time I walked into that empty room, the smell of fresh paint mixed with raw shea butter made me cry. It wasn't just a shop, it was a rebirth. But success is a jealous partner. She tests your commitment. Morehouse and Spelman Homecoming was my proving ground. I set up a folding table, a banner that read, "Ask me about edges," and stacked my jars high. By noon, the line wrapped down the block. Choir mothers, students, alumni, barbers, everybody wanted a piece of crown and glory. By sundown, 600 jars were gone. My cash box was heavy, my feet were sore, but my heart was full. Then, as I packed up, I saw her. Candace. She stood at the edge of the crowd, watching me count money. Her smile wasn't warm, it was calculating. She leaned down to whisper in someone's ear, then pulled out her phone, snapping pictures like paparazzi. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Success shines, but it also casts shadows, and mine was wearing a silk blouse. That night, back at the shop, I stacked bills on the counter, excitement warring with unease. I whispered to myself, "Lord, don't let me build something just for her to steal." For the first time since the motel, fear felt bigger than laughter. The butter was booming. The shop was real, but Candace was circling like a hawk. Loretta had no idea that her own formula was about to be weaponized against her. The shop smelled like fresh labels and butter, like possibility poured into jars. I kept the door propped with a paint bucket, while the fans dried a new coat of eggshell on the wall. A handwritten sign read, "Crown and Glory Fulfillment, please knock twice." It made me smile. I'd gone from room 12 to suite B in 6 months, from motel towels to purchase orders. I worked in a slow rhythm measure, mix, pour, pray, letting the boredom of repetition hold me steady. The way a hymn keeps time, even when the singer's voice trembles. The orders kept coming. Kendra's post had turned into 5 more. Students filmed wash day videos in dorm bathrooms under bad lighting, laughing about Auntie's science and first Sunday shine. I printed the comments and taped them on the wall like report cards I was proud to bring home. Every so often, I looked at the doorway and wondered if pride had a lock strong enough to keep trouble out. It didn't. Trouble wore perfume. She came in on a Wednesday, heels clicking like a metronome, lips glossed, smile pinned on like jewelry. Candace. She glanced around like a realtor, not a door. "So, this is it," she said softly, running a finger along a shelf. "Cute." For now, I kept my hands busy. "Afternoon, Candace. Can I help you?" "You can," she purred, setting her tote on my packing table as if it were hers. "A city grant cycle is opening innovation and community impact. You'd never get through those forms alone." She tilted her head. "But with me, we could make this legit." On the surface, it sounded like mercy. Underneath, it sounded like a snare drum, tight, stretched, waiting to snap. Still, I went quiet and let her talk. I'd learned more in the last 6 months from silence than in 6 years of speaking. She pulled out a folder. "I'll handle the grant," she said, crisp as a news anchor. "Send me your full specs, recipes, supplier list, margins, customer data, everything. I'll submit under my company. Easier approvals. Then I'll sub the money to you as a consultant. Clean, professional." I felt something in my chest harden and cool, the way sugar turns to brittle. "Your company?" I asked, light as a feather. She blinked slow. "Yes, my limited liability company, Johnson Strategic Holdings, grants preferred established entities. I'm doing you a favor, Miss Loretta. Miss not Ma, not Mother, not even Loretta. Miss like a door closing that had never been open." I nodded, slow as molasses. A favor. What she didn't know was that 2 days earlier, Ms. Alvarez at the Small Business Development Center, that's what SBDC stands for, the folks who help little boats like mine learn to sail, had told me to expect scams dressed as salvation. "If anyone asks for your specs, it's either an investor with a contract," she'd said, "or a thief with a smile." I set my measuring spoon down and offered Candace a chair. She sat as if the air were beneath her. We were 2 women in one story, holding different pens. "Tell you what," I said, voice honey, "let's collaborate, but I like to keep my ducks in a row." I reached into my tote, pressed a button inside, and the tiniest blue light blinked. I'd bought a key fob recorder from a pawn shop the week before the same way. I once kept receipts in a shoebox, just in case. "Go on then," I said. "Tell me exactly how you'll sub that grant to me." Candace's smile sharpened. "Easy. I keep the grant under my LLC again, limited liability company. Standard stuff, so the funds land with me, not you. We'll use my vendor account to purchase your raw materials, labels, jars, everything, and I'll control this. In return, you provide your full formula. We'll scale fast. You get exposure. I handle the money." She smoothed her blouse. "You'll thank me later." Wind could have blown through my ears and not made a sound. There it was, plain as day. I asked one more question, soft as a bedtime story. "And my ownership?" She didn't blink. "You own your labor, Miss Loretta. I'll own the business." I poured a line of butter into warm jars, lids clinking like tiny bells. We chatted 5 minutes more, her voice glossy, mind steady, and then she left. When the door shut, I turned the sign to closed, sat at the packing table, and rewound the recording. I listened to every word, every vowel. I saved the file to a thumb drive, then another. Then I emailed the audio to myself with the subject line, "For Marcus." Marcus was the lawyer Ms. Alvarez had recommended. "He doesn't do cheap," she'd warned. "He does right." I sent him the audio. He called within the hour. "Miss Johnson," he said, voice like a bass note. "You bake butter. I bake paper. Let me do the cooking." That night, the shop emptied into its own quiet. I brewed tea on a hot plate and leaned against the doorway. The boring hum of the fan washing over me like a rain I could control. Outside Campbellton Road rolled by buses sighing, teens laughing, life ordinary and loud. Inside, I counted jars, counted breath, counted blessings. Stability felt fragile as a label edge, but it was mine. It was late, close to midnight, when I heard the knock on the shop door. I froze, heart thumping. Atlanta nights aren't always friendly, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the blinds, and my breath caught. Daryl, my son. He stood there in the glow of the streetlight, shoulders slumped, eyes red like he'd been wrestling tears, or whiskey, or both. For a second, I thought about not opening, but a mother's heart don't ever stop beating for her child, no matter how cracked it gets. I unlocked the door. He stepped inside slow, like the room itself might reject him. "Ma," he whispered, voice thick, I had to see you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. His hands trembled as he pressed it into mine. "Read it when I'm gone." I didn't know what to say. My throat was tight, my pride and my pain locked in a tug-of-war. "I'm sorry," he muttered. "Candace, she got in my head. I ain't been the man I should have been. I miss you." His eyes darted around the shop, jars stacked high, labels shining. "You've built all this without me. I should be proud, but mostly, I'm just ashamed." He rubbed his face with both hands, then looked at me one last time. "Don't tell Candace I came, please." And just like that, he was gone back into the night before I could even whisper his name. I locked the door, sat down at my work table, and unfolded the letter. The words were shaky, scribbled, but they were my son's truth. "Ma, I lied to the kids, told them you left Atlanta. I thought it was easier, but it wasn't. It killed me inside. Every time they asked about you, I saw the boy I used to be, the boy you carried through storms. I'm sorry I chose comfort over courage. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging for it anyway." My tears dropped onto the ink, smudging his words. I tucked the letter into my Bible, between Psalms and Proverbs, where prayers live. That night I lay awake thinking about the son I raised and the man he became. Weak, flawed, torn between a domineering wife and a mother he betrayed. He wasn't evil, he was lost. And I made myself a promise. If God ever opened the door for reconciliation, I'd be ready. Not for me, for Naya and Malik, my grandchildren, who deserved to know the full truth of their family. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. Sometimes it's about clearing the path, so the next generation don't trip over the same stones. I closed the Bible and sat there a long time, the boredom of the night wrapping me like an old robe. Grief is noisy. The first week, by month 6, it hums. By month 12, it rocks. Back and forth, until you're not sure if it's holding you or you're holding it. The next morning, I walked the recording over to Marcus's office. He listened, fingers steepled. "We'll file your trademark and a provisional patent on the process," he said. "Also a cease and desist ready to go. If she files anything with your formula, we pull the pin." I nodded, half dizzy from the new language trademark. A name with teeth. Provisional, a clock that buys time, Marcus explained like a teacher with patience. He even clarified acronyms the way I needed. SBDC, Small Business Development Center. SBA, Small Business Administration, the folks who gave you that money. LLC, Limited Liability Company, a way to separate a person's pockets from a company's debts. I wrote them all down in a little notebook labeled Crown School. 61 is still school age, if you're honest. Days turned into a steady drum, mix, label, ship. T and B2 stylists with hands like prayer came on part-time to help. We practiced boring on purpose. Systems are just fancy words for habits you can trust. Then the email hit. City of Atlanta grant review confirmation. Not to me. To a shared contact who thought I'd been looped in. The applicant, Johnson Strategic Holdings, LLC. The project, Crown and Glory Sunday Butter Community Manufacturing Initiative. Applicant contact, Candace. I printed it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I took a sip of lukewarm tea, turned my sign to closed, and called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "Lift the veil," he said, voice quiet. Time to let her hear herself. We invited Candace back under the sweetness of collaboration. She arrived crisp, confident, carrying a newer folder this time. Highlights, the air of a woman pre-celebrating victory she hadn't earned. "Record again," Marcus murmured from the conference room speaker, hidden out of sight. I pressed the little blue light. "Let's finalize," I said, sliding a blank form across the table. List your company details here, and just repeat how the funds will flow, so our accountant is clear. Candace exhaled with theater. Loretta, I'll keep the grant under my LLC. I'll own it. You'll provide the formulations. I'll control disbursement and scale. It's standard. You don't have the credentials. She tapped her nail. We can put your name as community liaison. Community liaison, like a greeter at the door of my own house. I smiled. Thank you, Candace. That's very clear. She left floating. I locked the door and laughed one short, tired burst that tasted like old medicine. Then I emailed Marcus the audio. He replied with 2 attachments, a formal cease and desist letter with footnotes sharp enough to shave with, and a draft press statement I hoped we'd never need. I turned the sign to open and went back to work. That evening, I took the long way home, past the Royal Inn. The sign still missed half its letters. A couple argued at a door. A baby cried and then quieted. I parked, walked in, and bought Mr. Earl a coffee from the lobby machine. How's the crown, Miss Loretta? He asked, eyes kind, shining. I said, but folks keep reaching for it. He chuckled. Let 'em reach. A crown that's earned sits tight. Back in the shop, I stacked shipping boxes and counted out a roll of fragile tape. Boring tasks, blessed things. Somewhere around box 12, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. Then, a barked voice about a routine compliance check. I glanced at the clock. Late. Too late for routine. My stomach tightened. I hung up, turned off the fans, and stood very still, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator, the night outside, the quiet breath of a business that wanted to live. I whispered to the jars, to the room, to the girl I used to be. Hold, baby, just a little longer. A paper trap had been set and sprung, but storms roll in from more than one direction. Loretta had the recordings, the lawyer, the plan, yet a knock was coming that could shut down everything in a single clipboard visit. And when the lights flickered, an old friend would arrive with the U-Haul. That's the rental truck you grab when life says move now, and a miracle packed in the back. The knock came at 9:07 a.m. sharp. Men in city-issued jackets, clipboards in hand, stood at the door of Suite B. Their eyes scanned the ceiling tiles, the floor drains, the fire extinguisher that wasn't mounted yet. Routine inspection, one said flatly, though his tone was more like judgment than routine. They walked through slow, scribbling notes. One tapped a pipe with his pen. Another measured the distance between shelves. Finally, the taller one shook his head. Out of code. You'll need upgrades before reopening. My stomach sank. But sir, we just opened. Not our problem. You'll get a letter. When the door shut, silence fell heavier than any gavel. My jars sat lined on the counter, full of hope but worthless without approval. My hands shook. Candace's perfume lingered in memory, and I knew this wasn't random. That night, I sat in the shop's dark, sipping stale tea. The hum of the refrigerator mocked me. I had come too far, twofold, but fear pressed against my chest like a weight. And then had a rattle of gears. A big orange U-Haul truck pulled up, back door rolling open like a stage curtain. Out stepped Mr. Earl, the Royal Inn desk clerk. His gray beard gleamed under the streetlight. Miss Loretta, he said, climbing down. I heard you needed a miracle. The back of the truck was stacked with shelves, extinguishers, boxes of supplies, all scavenged from a warehouse job his cousin was closing. Pay me when you can, he shrugged. Some folks invest in stocks. I invest in people. I broke, tears poured. I hugged that old man like he was blood. Together we hauled shelves, bolted them to walls, mounted the extinguishers, scrubbed every corner. The boredom of cleaning became holy work, each stroke of a mop like rewriting scripture. 2 weeks later, the inspectors returned. Their pens hovered, their brows furrowed, but in the end, approved. I exhaled so deep it felt like my ribs unclenched. The shop was alive again. The hustle grew. T&B. My 2 stylists worked beside me, their laughter filling the room as they twisted jars and told stories. Every batch felt smoother, every label straighter. We weren't just making butter, we were making belief. Orders doubled, then tripled. Target's local incubator program invited us to pitch. The application was 20 pages, each one longer than a Sunday sermon, but I filled them all the day of the pitch. I stood in a room with polished tables and judges who looked like they ate balance sheets for breakfast. My voice trembled at first, but then I remembered room 12, the motel walls, the sound of Deaconess Marie shouting about heaven on her scalp, This isn't just product, I told them. This is survival whipped into butter. This is dignity in a jar. And every curl deserves a coronation. Silence, then applause. 2 weeks later, Target placed a trial order, 200 jars per store. My hands shook as I signed the contract. But while I climbed, Candace lurked. She filed complaints. She whispered rumors about unlicensed labs. She even spread stories in church about unsafe formulas. Each one felt like a thorn. But every time, I answered not with rage but with receipts, documents, approvals, clean inspections. One night, exhausted, I sank into my office chair. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Crown and Glory sold out at Target Camp Creek in 48 hours. I laughed. That belly-deep laugh again. T&B danced in the shop, jars in hand like trophies. But success isn't silent. It echoes on echoes, attract envy. That Sunday, Candace cornered me in the church parking lot again. Her smile was sharp, her voice sugar. "Congratulations, Miss Loretta," she said, "but don't forget everything high falls harder." I leaned in, voice low, steady as stone. "Candace, some of us fall and get up. Others trip on their own lies. Which one you gonna be?" Her eyes flickered, but she said nothing, just turned and walked, heels clicking, perfume trailing like poison in the air. By year 3, Crown and Glory wasn't just jars on shelves. It was a movement. We added Hush Baby Leaven and Night Repair Oil. We built the Anti-Accelerator Saturday class teaching young stylists how to keep books, track taxes, and say no without guilt. At our first workshop, 15 women sat in folding chairs, notebooks open. I told them, knowledge is more than Powerite's armor. Never hand your crown to someone else's hands. They nodded, eyes shining, pens flying across paper. Afterward, one young stylist whispered, "Miss Loretta, I thought I was just doing hair. Now I feel like I'm building an empire." I smiled. Baby, empires start with edges. The shop walls carried the rhythm of laughter, scissors snipping, jars sealing. Life had turned boring routines into holy rituals. But even in joy, I felt a shadow pressing at the edges. Candace wasn't finished. I didn't know it yet, but the next chapter would bring her boldest strike, a grant filed, a plan stolen, a family torn wider, and when the storm hit, I would need more than butter to hold the crown steady. The hustle was strong, the jars were selling, the movement was alive, but shadows have patience, and Candace's hand was on a pen that could steal everything unless Loretta's quiet preparation was ready to roar. The email came on a Thursday morning. Subject line, plain as oatmeal. Reference request, small business grant. I almost deleted it. Spam, I thought. But when I opened it, the words froze me. "Dear Ms. Loretta Johnson, we are considering awarding a grant to Ms. Candace Johnson, founder of Crown Looks Organics, and she has listed you as a professional reference." I sat back in my chair, my teacup trembling in my hand. Crown Looks Organics, my formula, my Sunday butter, my whole survival story in someone else's name. Candace hadn't just copied me, she had put my name down to vouch for her theft. I laughed then, not a sweet laugh, the kind of laugh that rolls out when betrayal is so bold it stops being cruel and starts being comedy. "Well," I whispered, "the snake done shed her skin and strutted naked." That Sunday, I invited her to my shop. T&B exchanged looks, but I waved off their questions. Candace arrived in a white pantsuit, nails like daggers, smile sharper than both. She leaned on my counter, eyes scanning my displays like a thief casing a museum. "Collaboration," she purred. I pressed record on my phone. Screen dimmed on the desk beside me. "I'll handle the grant," she said smoothly. "Send me your full specs, ingredients, supply chain, packaging vendors. I'll submit under my LLC. Easier approvals. You know how these offices are. Then we'll share the profits." Her lipstick glistened when she smiled. "You trust me, right?" I leaned back, sipping sweet tea slow. "Candace, trust is like edges. Once it's gone, hard to grow back." She didn't flinch. She thought she was winning. She strutted out, heels clacking against the floor, my recorder capturing every word. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my lawyer Marcus, a tall man with a bald head and a voice like thunder when needed. He listened to the recording, lips pressed tight. "She just handed you evidence," he said. "That's fraud. You don't even need to sue. One letter from me, and that grant's dead before it starts breathing." I smiled. "Let it breathe just long enough. I want her to think she's winning." The grant committee called Candace for verification. She strutted in with charts, mock-ups, my formula printed neat in her binder. But when they cross-checked her specs with FDA registrations, supply invoices, and inspection reports, my name appeared. My LLC, my tax ID. They called me in. I walked into that office with Marcus at my side, Sunday hat tilted just so, sat down, smiled, and slid the recording across the table. Candace's voice filled the room. I'll handle the grant. Send me your specs. Easier approvals. The committee chair's eyes widened. Marcus leaned forward, voice steady as scripture. This is attempted fraud. Ms. Johnson is the rightful owner. Any funds awarded otherwise would be subject to litigation. Silence. Papers shuffled. Then the chair cleared his throat. Thank you, Miss Loretta. We've heard enough. Candace's grant application was denied. Mine was approved. But the snake doesn't slither away quietly. That evening, Candace stormed into the church parking lot, her voice a hiss. You think you've won. This isn't over. I turned, slow, steady. Candace, the devil said the same thing when they rolled the stone in front of the tomb. But baby, 3 days later, he was gone. Her face twisted, rage bubbling. She stomped away, heels cracking the pavement like gunfire. By 2018, Crown and Glory hit $5.8 million in revenue. Alta Cold, BeautyCon booked me as a speaker. My jars sat on shelves coast to coast. Marcus smiled across the conference table. Miss Loretta, it's time. Buy the house they swore you'd never step foot in. And so I did. The Tyler Place estate in Buckhead, 12,000 square feet of chandelier, and a library with mahogany shelves that smelled of history. When the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran the headline, Black-owned beauty brand founder buys historic Buckhead estate, I sat in that library, sipping tea, tears sliding soft. Not from sadness, from rebirth. But the past wasn't done knocking. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. Security cameras showed them, Daryl, Candace, and 2 teenagers I barely recognized. My hand trembled on the doorknob. My heart whispered a warning. I opened the door, but left the screen locked. Well, I said softly. Daryl, Candace, children, I barely know. Daryl's voice cracked. We just came to congratulate you, Ma. I tilted my head. How thoughtful. Congratulations delivered. Anything else? Candace's smile was fake sugar. Families should stick together, especially when there's room. She gestured at the mansion behind me. I let the silence stretch, heavy as stone, and then I unlatched the screen. Come in, let's talk. But no, this truth always costs something. And tonight, the bill is due. The kids stepped inside, wide. Daryl's shoulders sagged. Candace's heels clicked against marble. Arrogance in every step. They thought this was reconciliation. They didn't know it was reckoning. The screen door closed, and the echoes of their footsteps filled the mansion. But I wasn't just a host. I was the judge, the witness, and the jury. And before the night ended, secrets buried in lies would crack wide open. The marble dining table gleamed under the chandelier. I had polished it twice that morning, like I knew tonight would be Judgment Day. Candles flickered low, casting shadows that seemed to lean in. Listening. By the time Crown and Glory hit $5 million in revenue, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Buyers, stylists, college girls writing theses on black hair, economics, even an invitation to BeautyCon in New York. My little jars that once sat on motel nightstand were now sitting on shelves in Target. But success always brings shadows. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Marcus, my lawyer, slid a card across my conference table. Thick cardstock, gold embossing. Evan Whitmore, managing partner, Apex Capital Ventures. He says he wants to invest, Marcus said carefully, or buy you out, buy me out. 2 weeks later, Whitmore himself walked into my Buckhead office, tall, tanned, suit so sharp it probably had a college degree. His shoes clicked across the marble floor like they owned it. He didn't even look at the jars lined neatly on the display shelf, just walked straight to the head of the table and sat down. Miss Johnson, he said smoothly, flashing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Crown and Glory is a beautiful passion project. Congratulations, you've carved out a lovely niche. I folded my hands on the table. Mr. Whitmore, this passion project put 3 young women through nursing school, opened 2 salons in underserved neighborhoods, and paid cash for this office suite. So let's not play small. His smile thinned. He opened a leather folder and slid a paper toward me. We're prepared to offer you $2.4 million for a full acquisition. That's life-changing money. At your age, why not retire, travel, relax, Let professionals take it from here. I stared at the number, $2.4 million. 5 years ago, when I was counting coins for motel rent, that would have looked like heaven, but now, it looked like an insult. You think I built a brand just to sell it for less than 1 year's revenue? I asked quietly. Whitmore leaned back, smirking. Miss Johnson, you've done well, but you don't have the infrastructure to scale nationwide. Logistics, supply chain, big box distribution. These waters are too deep. Apex has the muscle. You have a kitchen recipe. Let us professionalize it. Kitchen recipe. That stung, but I smiled, sweet. The way my mama taught me when folks thought they were better than you. You know, I said, when I first started, I mixed this butter in motel bowls. I labeled jars by hand. Folks laughed then, too, but the same women who laughed are now my best customers, and they keep me honest. This isn't a kitchen recipe, it's a crown. Whitmore chuckled low. Emotion doesn't scale, Miss Johnson. Numbers do. That's when T&B, my two right hands, peeked into the conference room with a cart. On it boxes stacked high with invoices, shipping orders, ledgers. T whispered, sorry to interrupt, Miss Loretta. We just finished the quarterly report. 6,000 units backordered, and Miss Alvarez from SBA says Walmart Corporate is requesting samples. Whitmore's eyes flickered, just for a second. He wasn't expecting that. I smiled wider. Numbers, you say. T, please leave a copy for Mr. Whitmore. T set the thick binder down in front of him. Pages of real numbers, sales, growth, expansions. Whitmore flipped a few pages, his smirk faltering. Still, he leaned back, trying to recover. Even so, expansion requires networks, buyers, relationships. We already have those, and we'd be happy to. That's when I interrupted. You know what, Mr. Whitmore? I may not sell Crown and Glory, but I'll buy something from you. Your buyer's list. He blinked. Excuse me. I leaned forward. You're here because you see value, but what you don't know is, I've already been approached by Ulta, Target, and Walmart. What I don't have are your middlemen, your contacts, your distributors. You wanted to buy me out cheap. Instead, sell me your list. I'll pay fair. Whitmore laughed nervously. That's not how this works. But Marcus, my lawyer, slid a pen across the table. Actually, Mr. Whitmore, every list has a price. And given Crown and Glory's growth trajectory, I'd say you'd rather profit off Miss Johnson than walk away with nothing. The room went quiet. T and B stood behind me, arms folded, like bodyguards with edges laid to perfection. Whitmore's jaw worked. Finally, he exhaled. 10,000. For the regional list only. I smiled. Sweet as honey. Done right it up. When he left, his shoulders were stiff, his stride a little less cocky. T whispered, Miss Loretta, did we just flip the script on a millionaire? I chuckled, gathering the binder. Baby, money don't make you smart. Wisdom does. And wisdom says never fold when you're holding the crown. That night, sitting in my sunroom, I poured sweet tea into my favorite glass and looked out at the magnolias. On the table beside me was Whitmore's buyer's list. 10 names, 10 doors waiting to be opened. The girl they thought was yesterday's trash on Cascade Road now had the keys to an empire. And somewhere deep inside I laughed, a soft, steady laugh that said, don't you ever underestimate Miss Loretta Johnson again. Candace sat at the far end, posture stiff, her smile plastic and cold. Darryl hunched beside her, sweat glistening at his temples. And across from me, two teenagers, Nia and Malachi's wide, nervous, unsure why their parents dragged them into this palace of a house. Children, I began, voice calm, as sweet tea on ice. Do you know why you're here? Malik shifted. Daddy said, you wanted to see us. I set down my glass slow. No, baby, I've always wanted to see you. It's your parents who didn't want me near. Nia frowned, confusion pulling at her face. But Daddy said, you moved away to Florida. He said you didn't want us anymore. The words sliced deeper than any blade. My hand trembled against the table, but I steadied it. That's a lie. I never left Atlanta. I was 10 minutes away, praying for y'all every night. The door was closed to me, not to you. Nia's eyes welled up. Malik turned toward his father, his voice sharp. Why would you say that? Silence. Heavy, choking silence. Darryl opened his mouth, but no words came. Candace cut in smooth, like she always did, her tone dripping poison wrapped in sugar. She's twisting things. Children, you know how older folks get. Memory gets fuzzy. Stories get exaggerated. I leaned forward, slow, deliberate. Then let's deal in receipts. I reached into my Bible and slid out a folded letter, Daryl's letter, his handwriting shaky, his words raw. "Your daddy wrote this to me years ago," I said, unfolding it. My voice read the lines steady, each word heavy. "Ma, I made a mistake. I let Candace push me into things I can't forgive myself for. Please don't hate me forever." The room cracked open like thunder. Nia gasped. Malik pushed back his chair. "Daddy, you wrote that." Daryl's face fell into his hands. I did." His voice broke. "Your grandma never left. I let it happen. I let Candace—" "Don't you dare put this on me," Candace snapped, slamming her palm on the table. "I kept this family together. I paid bills when you couldn't. I raised these kids when your mama was living in a motel because you kicked her out." I cut in, sharp as a blade. "Let's not rewrite the book, Candace. I know every chapter." Her eyes blazed, but the kids weren't looking at her anymore. They were looking at me, tears brimming, faces twisted in betrayal. "Grandma," Nia whispered, "we didn't know." I reached across, held her trembling hand. "Baby, how could you? You only knew what you were told. But here's what you need to remember, love. Don't disappear just because somebody locks the door. It waits, it prays, it survives." Malik stood, fists tight. "Daddy, you lied to us. For years." Daryl looked up, eyes bloodshot. I was weak. His voice cracked. "I let her decide. I was ashamed." Candace sneered, standing to— "Don't paint yourself as some victim, Daryl. You went along with every choice I made. You liked the control. You liked the house without her." Her mask had slipped now. No sweetness, no pretense, just raw venom. And I smiled not out of joy, but because truth had finally cracked her open. I stood tall, my chair scraping the marble. "Here's the truth," I said steady. "Nia and Malik, my door is open to you any time, any day that ends in Y. You will never be lied to again about where your grandmother is." But Daryl and Candace, I let the words drop like stones into water. "Access denied. Until you clean your mess, until you speak the full truth to these kids. My table is closed to you." Nia started crying softly. Malik's chest heaved. Daryl buried his face deeper. And Candace, she laughed, not from humor, but from fury. The kind of laugh that comes when power slips through your fingers. "You can't cut us out," she spat. "We're family. Family means something." I leaned forward, my voice low. "Family means something when it costs you something. Until then, you're just company that overstayed its welcome." Candace's face twisted, her voice rising. "You'll regret this." I tilted my head. "Baby, the only thing I regret is not learning sooner that snakes can't change their skin." The table was split. The truth laid bare. As the children clung to me and Candace stormed out, the mansion walls echoed with more than just pain. They echoed with rebirth. But the storm outside wasn't over. The house was quiet after the storm. Nia and Malik had gone upstairs, whispering to each other in voices too soft to catch. Candace's heels had clicked down the marble steps and out the door, her fury trailing behind her like smoke. Daryl, well, he stayed slumped in his chair, a shell of a man who once called me mama with pride. I sat in the sunroom, glass of sweet tea sweating in my hand, eyes on the sprawling garden I had planted to remind myself life could always grow again. But peace never comes easy, not when snakes have your scent. The very next morning, "Miss Loretta," he said, tone cautious, "I got word from the grant office. Somebody tried to claim your original Crown and Glory formula as theirs. The paperwork matches your earliest drafts." My throat tightened. "Candace," he sighed, "she's slick. But greedy folks always leave fingerprints. We got enough to challenge her, but it won't be quiet." I knew what that meant. If I pushed back, there'd be headlines. Family war, son's wife sues black beauty mogul. And that wasn't the legacy I wanted to leave my grandchildren. That night, Daryl came to me, eyes hollow. "Ma," he said, voice barely a whisper, "Candace is planning to sue you. Says she's got proof she helped build Crown and Glory." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to stop her." I leaned forward, studying his face. "Son, you stop her the same way you should have stopped her years ago, by telling the truth." He shook his head, tears threatening. "She ruined me, baby," I said, my voice firm. "She already did." The battle came quick. Letters from attorneys, threats of injunctions, Candace parading around like she invented every jar, every butter, every blessed label. She even went live on Facebook talking about her innovation, her hustle, her empire. But here's where her mask cracked. She forgot something simple. The streets talk. and the streets remembered. Choir mothers, Spelman students, even Mr. Earl from the Royal Inn folks flooded social media with their stories. Miss Loretta gave me my first jar. Miss Loretta taught me edges before YouTube ever did. Miss Loretta's butter healed my scalp after chemo. Receipts stacked higher than her lies. Still, the weight pressed heavy on me. I wasn't just fighting for a business, I was fighting for my name, my dignity, my bloodline. At 60, I didn't want to be remembered as the woman who lost her crown to her daughter-in-law's greed. One night, I sat with Naya and Malik in the library. Books surrounded us, thick with wisdom, older than any of us. Nia touched my hand. "Grandma," she whispered, "don't let her take it. Crown and glory is you." Her eyes shone like her mama's once did, before the lies, before the bitterness. And Malik leaned in, voice steady. "We'll testify if you need us. Tell the court what Dad and Candace told us. We know the truth now." Tears stung my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt family standing behind me. The court date arrived. Candace strutted in, wearing a red suit sharp enough to cut glass. She sat across from me, lips curled in that same smirk she wore the day she put my bags on the curb. Daryl walked behind her like a shadow, shoulders hunched, eyes avoiding mine. The judge listened, papers shuffled, lawyers sparred. But the moment that silenced the room came when Nia stood, trembling but fierce. "My grandmother built this," she said, holding up a jar of Sunday butter. I watched her hands mix it. I watched her cry over it. I watched her give it away before she ever thought about money. "This is hers, not Candace's." The courtroom buzzed. The judge nodded slowly, and in that moment, I knew we had won. Candace stormed out before the verdict was read, heels striking like hammers. Daryl trailed after her, but not before glancing back once at me. His eyes said what his mouth never could: "I'm sorry." That evening, back in my Buckhead sunroom, I sat with Naya and Malik beside me. Contracts and court papers spread across the table. Marcus poured himself a small whiskey. "You did it, Miss Loretta," he said. "Crown and glory is safe." I shook my head softly. "No, Marcus. We did it. Me, my community, and these children who stood up when their parents fell down." I raised my glass of tea high. "To legacy, not just the kind written in dollars, but the kind written in hearts." Nia clapped. Malik laughed. And for the first time in years, my laughter joined theirs, deep, free, unshaken. The court battle was over, but peace. That was another storm waiting on the horizon, because success don't just attract snakes, it attracts wolves. And as Crown and Glory soared to new heights, whispers began to circle. Wall Street investors, buyouts, expansion offers. The question wasn't just whether I could keep my crown. It was whether I could keep my soul. The ink on the court victory was barely dry when the next storm came. This one didn't wear red suits or fake smiles. No, this one came wrapped in silk ties and Wall Street promises. It was 2019, a spring morning when Marcus called again. "Miss Loretta," he said carefully, "you're about to get attention from folks who never cared about shea butter, edges, or Sunday jars. Big money's circling." 2 weeks later, a black Escalade rolled up the drive of my Buckhead estate. Out stepped 3 men and a woman in tailored suits, sunglasses hiding their eyes. They looked like they owned half the world and they wanted the other half. "Mrs. Johnson," one said smoothly, shaking my hand like I was already sold. "We represent a group interested in acquiring Crown and Glory. Our offer is generous, $8 million upfront, plus stock options. $8 million. Even after everything I'd built, the number hit me like gospel thunder. I thought of the Royal Inn, where I counted pennies to stretch a night's stay. I thought of mixing jars in a motel bathroom, and now here they were, wolves in silk offering me a crown made of cash. But something in their eyes unsettled me. Too cold, too certain, like they weren't buying a business. They were buying me. I smiled politely. "I'll pray on it," they chuckled. "Of course, but pray fast deals don't stay on the table long." That night, I sat alone in my sunroom, lights low, sipping tea while cicadas sang. My mind spun. 8 million would secure my grandchildren's future, expand my reach, give me freedom. But freedom for who? Me or the wolves? I thought of Nia's words in court. "Crown and glory is you." Would selling mean losing myself? Sleep never came easy when trouble knocked. And this was no knock. This was a battering ram dressed like opportunity. 2 days later, at the shop, T and B, my 2 stylists, were buzzing like bees. Auntie T whispered, "Word is out. Folks saying investors want to white label Crown and Glory. Strip your name off. sell it under theirs. My chest tightened. They didn't just want my butter. They wanted my story, my crown. That evening at Bible study, Deaconess Marie caught my hand. "Child, don't you forget you started this in God's kitchen. Don't sell your altar for silver." Her words clung to me like oil, but temptation has many voices. The next week, I attended a business expo in Chicago. A panelist pulled me aside after my talk. She was sharp, young, polished. "Miss Loretta," she said, "you don't have to sell, you scale. Licensing deals, distribution partnerships, you can keep control for the first time." I saw a path that wasn't just wolves or poverty. There was another way, but wolves don't back down easy. One evening, another offer landed on my desk. This time, it wasn't sweet, it was sharp. "Except within 30 days, the letter read, or risk legal complications regarding your product formulas." My heart raced. Was Candace behind this? Was somebody feeding them information? I didn't know, but I knew this. When wolves circle, you don't run, you stand. I called Marcus that night. My voice was steady, though my knees trembled. "If they want a fight, they're gonna get one." But Marcus find me out. Who's feeding them my secrets? I got snakes in my garden. And just like that, the battle wasn't just about selling or staying. It was about betrayal all over again. Only this time, it wasn't on Cascade Road. It was in the heart of the empire I'd built with my own two hands. Chapter 10. Snakes in the Garden. Marcus showed up at my Buckhead estate with a folder so thick it looked like a choir hymnal. He laid it on the mahogany table, eyes serious. "Miss Loretta," he said, tapping the folder, "we traced the leak. Someone's been sending your supplier invoices and formulation notes to outside parties. This ain't random. This is intentional." I felt my stomach drop, same way it did years ago on Cascade Road, when Darryl shut the door. My mind raced. T&B were loyal like blood. Mr. Earl would rather cut off his right hand than betray me. Who else had access? Marcus flipped a page. There it was. My son's signature. Darryl Johnson. I wanted to scream, wanted to fling that folder across the room and deny it. But denial don't erase ink. He'd done it. My own boy. After all the tears, the letter he wrote, begging forgiveness, the chance I gave him to step back into my life, he sold me out for a wolf's payday. I sat there silent, the clock ticking louder than my heartbeat. Marcus waited. "Do you want to press charges?" I closed my eyes, and I saw Nia Malik, 2 children who didn't ask for broken promises, who deserved more than another courtroom shouting match. "No," I said finally, my voice low. "We don't drag him through mud. Not yet. We tightened the walls, we cut off every leak, and we let the snakes starve in their own garden." That night, I drove to the old motel, the Royal Inn, still glowing weak in the dark. Mr. Earl was at the desk, glasses low on his nose. "Miss Loretta," he said softly, "you look like you're carrying 10 crosses." I told him. Every word, the wolves, the offers, the betrayal. His eyes watered, but his voice was steady. "Child," he said, "you forget where you started. This place, right here at this motel, these cracked walls, that was your garden too. You grew roses out of dumpsters. Don't you ever think snakes can choke you now?" I held his hand, and for the first time that week, I breathed deep. But betrayal cuts deep. I called Darryl the next morning. "Son," I said, voice calm as Sunday prayer, "I know what you did." Silence. Then his breath shook. "Ma, I needed money. Candace, she's drowning us in debt. I thought if I cut him off. You thought wrong, and you cut your own rope. You won't see a dime from me. Not until you find your backbone." The line went dead. 2 weeks later, at the Crown and Glory headquarters, T ran into my office, face pale. "Auntie, you gotta see this." On her phone, a viral post, a beauty blog claiming Crown and Glory's formulas were stolen from another company. Photos attached, fake documents, lies polished so well they gleamed like truth. The wolves had gone public, and the snake had handed them the map. I leaned back in my chair, steadying my breath. "All right then," I whispered. "If it's war they want, it's war they'll get." But deep down, a question clawed at me. Could Crown and Glory survive betrayal twice, first from family, now from the world? The headline burned across every blog, every feed, every glossy magazine trying to tear down what took me years to build. Crown and Glory accused of formula theft. Is the beloved brand a fraud? Fraud. The word sat heavy, like chains, in my Buckhead sunroom. Sunlight pouring through glass. I held the newspaper with shaking hands. My tea turned cold. T&B sat across from me, faces tight with anger. "They lying. Auntie B snapped. Everybody who touched your jars knows they came from your hands. We'll clap back online. But clapping back don't heal scars. No, I said, my voice slow, firm. We don't throw mud in mud. We plant truth in soil, and truth always grows. Marcus called that afternoon. Loretta, the wolves are moving. They want to force you into a buyout. If the public thinks you're crooked, you'll have no choice but to sell cheap. I laughed bitter. Cheap, baby. Nothing about me ever been cheap. Not my sweat, not my crown. But inside, my chest ached. I remembered the Royal Inn walls, the smell of pine sol, the days when survival was a $1 menu, and now the whole world could be snatched away, not by poverty, but by lies. We held a press conference. Cameras flashed like lightning. My hair wrapped in royal purple, edges shining with the very butter they called fake. I stepped to the mic. My name is Loretta Johnson. I built Crown and Glory with castor oil, sea butter, and God's mercy, in a motel room they said was unfit for living. My formulas are mine. My story is mine. And if you doubt it, check the receipts. Every invoice, every ledger, every jar sold with my name on it. We are not frauds. We are fighters. The crowd murmured. Some clapped. Some whispered. The wolves smiled in the back row. But war don't end with speeches. That night, anonymous emails hit my inbox. Threats. Photos of my shop, circled in red like targets. Sell or else, one message read. I sat in the dark, lamp off, scrolling with cold fingers. Fear tried to creep in, whispering old lies. You're alone. You're too old. You can't fight them. Then my phone buzzed. A video called .nia. Double quotes grandma, she said, her teenage face fierce. Don't let them take your crown. If they drag you, we'll march. My friends already posting. Hashtag Stand with Loretta is trending. Trending. My grandbaby turned hashtags into armor. I smiled through tears. Baby, looks like we're going to war together. The next morning, the hashtag exploded. Influencers, pastors, celebrities, and an old choir member who made it big on Broadway posted pictures with jars of Crown and Glory. The wolves didn't expect a choir, and baby, we sang loud. But then Marcus called again. His voice shook. Loretta, they've filed an injunction. Court hearing in 2 weeks. If the judge rules against you, they can freeze your accounts, shut down your shops. I closed my eyes, breathing deep. War wasn't just online anymore. It was in the courthouse. And this time, the crown was on trial. The courthouse smelled of old wood and polish. Like every prayer ever whispered, there still hung in the rafters. I wore a navy blue, my mother's brooch pinned over my heart. Crown and Glory wasn't just a company anymore. It was survival, dignity, legacy, all sitting on trial. Candace showed up, sharp suit, lips painted cruel red. Earl sat beside her, slouched eyes avoiding mine. Across the aisle sat the wolves' lawyers, briefcases heavy with lies dressed up as evidence. The judge adjusted his glasses. Case number 1472, Crown and Glory versus Crown Looks Holdings. Allegations of theft, fraud, and damages. Fraud, that word again. It echoed, but this time, I didn't flinch. Marcus rose, papers in his hand, voice steady as scripture. Your Honor, Crown and Glory began in a motel room, jars whipped by hand. We have invoices, supplier receipts, sworn testimonies. This is not fraud. This is entrepreneurship, born of necessity and faith. The wolves' lawyer smirked. Where's the proof? Her formulas are original. That's when T&B rolled in a cart stacked with binders, every ledger, every handwritten formula, every church sale from day one. Deaconess Marie herself took the stand. She held up her jar like it was holy water. Your Honor, I bought this from Miss Loretta in 2013. Put some on my scalp, and I shouted louder than the preacher. This butter is hers. Laughter rippled in the courtroom. Even the judge smiled. Then came the twist. Marcus slid a recording across the table. Candace's voice filled the room. I'll handle the grant. Send me your specs. I'll file under my LLC. Silence fell, thick as syrup. Candace froze. Earl buried his face in his hands. The judge's gavel struck once. Sharp, case dismissed. Crown and Glory stands. Damages awarded to Miss Johnson. Outside, cameras flashed. Microphones shoved in my face. Miss Loretta, how does it feel to win? I held my head high. Baby, this ain't just my win. This is every woman told she was too old to start over. Every mother thrown away by her own. Every dream they tried to bury. Today we proved, crowns don't break, they shine. That night, back at my Buckhead estate, I sat in the sunroom with Naya and Malik beside me. We drank sweet tea, laughed at old stories. T and B danced in the kitchen, jars lined up on the counter. The wolves were silent now. The snakes had slithered back into the dark. And me, I wasn't broken, discarded, or forgotten. I was crowned. Crown and Glory hit $8.2 million that year. But the money wasn't the legacy. The legacy was the laughter of my grandchildren, echoing through halls that once felt empty. The legacy was a jar of butter on every kitchen table from Atlanta to Oakland. A reminder that survival can bloom into glory. From curb to crown, the Loretta Johnson story is more than just a bedtime tale. It's a reminder that being thrown away doesn't make you worthless. Sometimes it frees your hands to pick up your crown. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, cinematic sleep stories. Tell us in the comments, what's your curb to crown story? Share this video with someone who needs to hear that setbacks are not endings, they're setups for something greater. Because one voice, one testimony, can light the way for another.